Often you will hear someone say something about the past which is meant to amaze you, meant to make you think, wow, really? Did people live like that? Why did they put up with it? Why didn't they rebel? They must have been so different then. Why were people so wrong back then? Why didn't they live like us now that we've got everything right? Well, there are in fact many things that perhaps weren't shocking at the time because they were just part of normality for people. Just as the world around us now we accept as normal because, well, it's the world we grew up in, isn't it? People say, well, that's the way the world is, isn't it? Well, that's the way it's done. Well, that's how we do things. People say this. They're used to the world they live in. Well, they have to be. You're in that world. You're going to have to live in it. You may as well get on with it. For instance, in the past, in medieval England, there was a class of people known as villeins. Not villains, villains. Slightly different pronunciation, very different meaning. These people were technically, although not in practice completely, tied to the land. So if two villains got married and produced children, those children would be villains. And villains owed opus, that is work, to the lord of the local manorial estate. So for so many days of the year they had to work his fields. So they were assets to the manorial estate. So the lord of the manor would want villains to get married because then they'd produce more villains that would then be, in the next generation, tied to the land, and so the estate would be secured in perpetuity. So when a villain died, leaving, say, a widow, that widow ought, as far as the lord is concerned, to get married, because if she's of breeding age, she'll be producing more villains. Now, it would be normal to give her a few months to, get over the last husband and find a new one, but if she still hadn't got a husband, then, and you may find this amazing, it was possible for the lord to send around officers, bailiffs or whoever, to make that woman get married. They would say to her, right, we're going to give you 3 months to get married, and if you're not married in 3 months, we will pick out a husband and we will make the marriage happen. And you might think, what? People really did that? They were forced to marry other people that they hadn't chosen? What if they didn't like them? Well, first, remember, these are people. A manorial estate was not very big. Everyone would know everyone. And if you created a marriage that was never going to be an easy one, you'd be creating a difficulty for everybody. So it would be in your interests, if you were running that manor, to make sure that each marriage was at least a reasonably happy one. You would only do this as a last resort. These are real people. They all had ability to negotiate, they all had ability to object, make life difficult for each other. Yes, it did happen, but it didn't happen very often. Now, fast forward to today. No, let's not fast forward to today. Fast forward to 200 years in the future, and a historian is talking about today, about Britain, and I'm sure lots of other countries around the world, and says, oh yes, in those days, when a baby was born, the state sent round inspectors, and if the inspectors were not satisfied that the baby was being brought up properly, those inspectors had the power to take those children away. Yep, it's true. Health workers and social workers and so forth visit people in their homes today, and if they think you're not raising your children properly, you're neglecting them or something like that, they can take your children away. Now, this doesn't happen all the time. You know it doesn't happen all the time. But you know it happens. Yes, we actually live in a world in which our overlords can take our children away. Now, you may think that it's bad to be forced to marry someone you didn't choose, and I'd agree with you, but isn't it actually worse to have your children taken away from you? For a woman, what is a worse fate? Being forced to marry a guy you don't like very much, or having your children taken away? If you had to choose between those two, which would you pick? Which is really worse? Do we live in such a wonderful world now? In 200 years' time, people will be saying, what? What do you mean? So children effectively belonged to the state? The state could just take your children away? Why didn't people rebel? How did they put up with this? Well, that's the way things are done now. So, if you wonder what it was like to be a villain back in the days of the 14th century, say in England, well, actually, you already know, because we're all villains now. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.